Hi, I'm Donna Ray.
And I'm Al Wadley.
Welcome to our podcast, Feldenkrais for Life.
In each episode, we will discuss ideas and experiences pertaining to the Feldenkrais method.
You're going to learn skills that will move pain to comfort, anxiety to ease, and we'll explore learning and how to spark creativity.
To learn more about Donna, visit her site at donnaray.com.
To find Al Wadley, go to achievingexcellence.com. Hi, Al.
Hey, Donna. How you doing?
I'm very well, thanks. You?
I'm doing pretty good. Pretty good. Yeah. So what have you been up to these days?
Well, I've been listening to Dr. Alia Crum. You can find her on the internet in various places. I've been thinking about her work, her wisdom, her science in regards to the Feldenkrais method. Her specialty is talking about mindset and how what we think consciously and sometimes not consciously with outside of our awareness, how it is affecting us and our behavior and at the level of our biochemistry. I find it really fascinating.
You were telling me about this before we started the podcast, and you relayed a very interesting study that she did. And I think our listeners would love to hear this. It's a really cool example of how just the power of suggestion can make a huge difference in our entire biology.
Yes, she studied a group of housekeepers that worked for several different hotels. And she interviewed them and asked them if they got regular exercise. And the majority of them said no. So they split the group and they informed one group that they got more exercise than what is medically recommended. And the other group, they did not inform them of that information. And so several weeks later, they looked at the vitals of the group that they told that they were getting plenty of exercise, and their blood pressure changed and they lost weight and they were happier. They reported being happier in the work that they did. So now you can go and look her up, Dr. Alia Crum, and listen to her version of this because she'll add some details that I'm not. But I think it is fascinating to know that being informed by somebody else that you're behaving in a healthy way actually changes your health.
It's huge. I love that example. She reframed their behavior or their activity because they're working all day, right? They're moving, they're pushing, they're pulling things, they're lifting, they're squatting, doing all kinds of movements. They're literally exercising 8 hours a day. Mm-hmm. And with that frame around it, changed their entire relationship with what they're doing. They realized they are exercising, and that changed how their bodies, their minds, and their brains responded to it. It's phenomenal.
It is phenomenal. So actually, I'll tell you another study too. This is another one that she loves to share. It's called the milkshake study. And briefly, college students were invited to her lab, and they were actually paid $75 to participate in the study. And half of the group was given a milkshake, and they were told that it was this, very rich, full of fat, delicious milkshake. And the other group was told that it was a super healthy milkshake, and it had all these, super health ingredients. And so they looked at the blood chemistry of the two groups, and the ones that were told that they were drinking a healthy drink, they became hungry faster than the other group. The two groups were so responsibly different, drank the same milkshake, but one got hungry faster and the other one felt satiated, and they didn't.
That is fascinating. It's so interesting, just the power of a suggestion like that. And they're being primed for a certain kind of physiological reaction. This reminds me of An example in Malcolm Gladwell's book, Blink, and I've heard this in other sources as well. He talks about an experiment, and this has been done with, as I understand, it's been replicated hundreds of times. So they do it with college students, of course. And they have these volunteer college students. They come into a room and they're asked to write a paragraph using words related to aging. And so then they're told, after you write this paragraph, take this sheet of paper down the hall, give it to this person. So the real part of the experiment is watching them walk down the hall, because their gait changes, their posture changes, they lower their head, round their shoulders. So all these physical changes take place based on them writing this paragraph using these words relating to age. So that's a really powerful example of how essentially an auto-suggestion is made. They didn't do it intentionally or know they were doing it, but it was an auto-suggestion for them to have more aged type behavior. And it's super fascinating to me that that is true and that can be done. And you think about that and the examples from Alia Crum, how can we use these kinds of ways of auto-suggesting for ourselves and to our clients and friends so that they can have better outlook on life, especially with ourselves as we age. And you and I were both talking about that before we started the podcast. We're both in our 60s now, and it's an interesting time of life. The 60s are.
Yeah, they truly are. And I see in my own mind how I succumb to aging suggestions all around me. It's like when you're in your 60s, you slow down. When you're in your 60s, you have aches and pains. When you're in your 60s, you have arthritic pain. I mean, these kinds of conversations are taking place all around me because so many of my friends are also in their 60s and even their 70s. In my own mind, say, I don't have arthritis and I don't need to get arthritis. You know, it's true that sometimes I'm a little achy, but it usually has to do with working out, you know, swimming and exercising or going for a hike, which is normal muscle achiness.
Yeah.
I don't push myself as hard as I might have as a younger person. I have no desire to. But many people I know in their 60s do all kinds of things. You know, they bike ride many, many miles a day, for example. I mean, all kinds of things that are beyond what 30-year-olds are doing. So I think we need to keep mixing it up so that our assumptions they're broken up, they're challenged, so that we live healthy lifestyles throughout our lifespan.
Yeah. You know, I'm thinking as you're talking about how we've gotten these messages about aging through our entire lives. We've watched our parents get older, watched our grandparents get older, and we've heard them say things like, just getting older, you know, oh, getting old sucks, you know, these kinds of things that we've heard our entire lives. And we start getting old, and these old programs, these old patterns start to come to the foreground. And it's like, we need to really be aware of those things and start to be able to prime ourselves in different ways, like you're saying. So we have a more healthy outlook. We can have more vitality, and we don't just have to succumb to these suggestions. It'd be really nice if, you know, health practitioners knew more about this. And you were showing me something earlier about your experience with a doctor recently. You know, if you're okay sharing that, because it's such a great example of how somebody's well-intended, but is giving a really bad suggestion.
Yeah, I recently had my annual physical where they draw blood and then give you the results. And my doctor that I've known for 40 years, and I love her. She's a wonderful, friendly, warm, caring person, very attentive. And she says, well, you know, your blood pressure is high. It's not threatening, but it's higher than it used to be. My cholesterol is higher than it used to be. You know, I have osteopenia like many women have when they're in their 60s. And she says, well, all these things are normal. And the fact that you have a healthy lifestyle means that you put them off for many years. But at some point, you just succumb to your genetics. Your mother had high blood pressure because she knew my mother. She treated my mother too. And so your mother had cardiovascular disease. And so I'm going, oh my gosh, I don't want to hear these things from this woman that I respect and that I've known for so many years. I would prefer that she said to me, well, you have some things going on here, but all of these are reversible. So she did finally say, well, you can slow this down. So she doesn't believe in reversibility, but she said you can take medication for this, medication for that. And, I'm reluctant to take medication. So I go to an alternative physician and I ask her, what should I do? And she has other recommendations. So I'll try the other recommendations first and increase exercise because that's easy to do. I can walk more. I can increase my steps per day, so to speak. And that's enjoyable to me. It's not difficult. And a colleague of mine who had studied kinesiology and various things, and he became a Feldenkrais practitioner. He studied bone density. And he said that if people would basically jog 30 steps a day, that they would maintain and even gain on bone density. He said, you don't have to do very much, but you've got to create some impact. Another physician friend of mine said, just put weights on your wrists when you go for a walk. It doesn't have to be a lot of weight, but just put a little bit on your wrist because it creates more, obvious pressure in your skeleton when you go for a walk. So some of these things are so easy to do, and the suggestions are powerful. So I'm implementing those suggestions, and I believe that I will actually gain instead of lose. As Dr. Sinclair says, he's the longevity physician and researcher that we've both been listening to and are familiar with. So I'd love to continue to promote how we change our brain and biochemistry through mindset. And this goes along with the Feldenkrais method. Dr. Feldenkrais said your mind is changing your brain. And your brain changes your mind too, but you've got to know how to do that. And we do know how to do that using the Feldenkrais method and by examining our belief systems.
Totally. Yeah. And it's a learned skill. I think a lot of people go through life just experiencing what happens to them and with the basic mindset precepts that they acquired through their development and don't really examine those. And I know the Feldenkrais method is teaching us to use our mind to be able to reprogram our brain for not only improved movement, but improved thinking, improved sensing, improved ways of feeling. So all these things get better through the Feldenkrais method because we learn to sense ourselves accurately and we learn to make discriminations and articulations in our movement. So we become more vital. We become more the driver of the bus, so to speak. I don't know if you've heard this analogy before, metaphor. It's like, who's driving your bus? Well, for a lot of folks, they're in the back seat in the bus and they're going along for the ride. You start to learn to use your mind and use your brain, then you can be in the driver's seat. You start to direct where you're going and how you're living your life. And you start to learn how to you're making different kinds of auto-suggestions to yourself for better existence.
All day long. We're doing that all day long. And I love that metaphor of driving your own bus because you're making decisions. As a bus driver, you're responding to your environment. You have to slow down, you have to speed up, you have to turn the corner. If there's a traffic jam, you may take an alternative route. So there are lots of decisions to be made by that bus driver. And by making those distinctions and being aware of your environment, you can make informed decisions. You're no longer going along for the ride in the back of the bus.
That's right. So it's very cool that Feldenkrais had this idea long before, the whole mindfulness movement and neuroscience was on top of this, that he had these ideas about the brain and learning and how using your mind, we can change the brain. We can change our ability to function. That always impresses me about him. He was decades ahead in his thinking. He was very explicit about it too, and which is very contrary to a lot of the thinking back in the 50s and 60s and 70s about how the brain worked and how the mind worked. So he was very, very much ahead of his time.
That's so true. And it's wonderful for those of us that have studied him, and he's available to study for anyone, any listener who's not yet taken the deep dive into the Feldenkrais method. It's available. You can read his books. You can find a Feldenkrais practitioner. You can practice the verbally guided lessons, awareness through movement. You can seek a Feldenkrais practitioner and get hands-on work. And all of it feels great. It's easy to do. And it's immediately revitalizing.
Yeah. All these great podcasts we've done too really help pull back the veil on the Feldenkrais method. And we're very explicit about how things work and how the method works and who Dr. Feldenkrais was and his great contributions. Yeah. So if you haven't listened to more episodes, listen to them all, because we really do make explicit what is often implicit in the work.
Yeah, and he becomes a grandfather figure in the minds of all of us and all of you who are listening that want to dive in. He can become your grandfather too. You see pictures of him when he's, in his late 70s. He's balding and has gray hair, and he saunters around with tremendous stability and strength and wisdom. And he loves to talk about how able he could speak about so many different subjects. And that's so true. Giving people information about his life and stories, vignettes that include all kinds of positive suggestions. So you can listen for those suggestions within his stories, because he's very aware of how he is changing the mindset of his listeners.
Yeah, he published a book. He translated a book of Emile Coué's. Emile Coué was an early pioneer in hypnosis and auto-suggestion, and self-hypnosis. And so Moshe translated this book from English into Hebrew, and then he added a couple of chapters. And the chapters really are about the somatic applications of the auto-suggestion. He noted that Coué's approach was primarily problem solving, and Feldenkrais was like, well, we could use this to promote behavior, actions that we want to achieve, that we want to be better at, to improve ourselves, and not just try and solve problems that we've already had, but to be more forward-thinking about how we use our mind, what kind of suggestions we give ourselves to become better people.
And better in that we become efficient in how we're doing what we're doing. So he was really engaged in the process of examining how we're doing what we're doing. And by making the distinctions that you were mentioning earlier, becoming aware of what we're doing and how we're doing it, the nervous system, and he says this explicitly, the intelligence of your nervous system will allow you to find the easy way. And therefore, we look for how to do things in a more comfortable, easy, pleasurable way, making the impossible possible. And the process itself becomes more available to us. And we create that bridge from awareness through movement into daily activities. And that is automatic.
Yes, it is.
It just happens.
I also want to add that when Feldenkrais did that translation, he was in his 20s. And that was decades before the Feldenkrais method was even conceived or came to the foreground. But it's just something unique about him as a man and his thinking, that all these little pieces you can see throughout his life history became what would become the Feldenkrais method. And so speaking to what you were just mentioning, the way the Feldenkrais method bridges into daily life is so beautiful, because I explain this to my students because they're starting out maybe with lessons with me. They want to know, well, how's this going to work? How's this going to show up? Is this going to fix my problem? And so I offer them the frame. I said, look, we're improving every aspect of your being, every aspect of your functioning. So everything gets better. Every aspect of your functioning improves. And so the problem areas also improve. And then you find that these things just show up spontaneously in your life. So maybe something that was hard to reach for suddenly easy, or you can stand longer and do your cooking in the kitchen, or that walk you like to go on, which you had to cut short a few months ago. Now you can go on for a longer walk. So the things that you do in your daily life just suddenly start to get better. And that's how the Feldenkrais method permeates into your daily life and your daily activities. We're improving function. We're improving it unconsciously, but you can have really great conscious appreciation for them.
Mm-hmm. It's so applicable. And it's reminding me that even while we're speaking, I'm noticing how I can lengthen my spine, how my weight is settling in my pelvis. I'm probably, by somebody from the outside, I look like I'm wiggling, which there is some truth in that. I'm a wiggler. But there's also informed wiggling. It can be that you're looking for comfort, lengthening or changing how you're standing. I know you're standing and speaking. Those of you that are listening, you can make minor adjustments while you're listening to the podcast. Or if you're going for a walk, you may attend to your stride, for example, or be sure to look outside of yourself and look around and take in the beauty of nature. Or if you're walking on a treadmill, to sense how you're moving while you're walking. So you develop dual attention and more beyond dual attention. You can be paying attention to how you're hearing, how you're making sense out of what we're saying, how you're moving, even while you're sitting or walking or standing. And you begin to play with those sensations in a way that it becomes entertaining. It's actually useful for you, but it's a lot more fun than the alternative.
Wondering if you could maybe guide us through a little experience like that.
Okay, so let's notice our breathing first. That's such a great way to start. And that's always available too. So if you're sitting, walking, standing, whatever or driving, you could be driving, notice your breathing. And as you're noticing your breathing, sense the movement of your chest and the movement of your belly. And if you find yourself in a place where you're sitting and it's possible to put a hand on your chest and put one hand on your belly, you can amplify the movement of your torso with your own hands. Now let's play around with that a little bit. So take a deep breath and hold your breath. And then push your belly out gently and pull it in. And notice how your chest responds. So you push it out and pull it in. And you may sense your shoulders moving. You can probably even feel your backside responding to that. And of course, breathe naturally when you're ready to breathe. Continue to notice your breathing. And now let's do the opposite. Breathe out all the way and hold your breath. And then push your belly out and pull your belly in. Notice how your chest is moving less than before, but it's still possible to feel that movement of your chest sinking and expanding. And maybe you're now moving your shoulders more, your shoulder blades. And then breathe naturally once again. So notice that in the course of altering your breathing, we brought in some details: the movement of your belly, the movement of your chest, the movement of your shoulders. So we've made a few distinctions. So continue doing whatever you're doing while you're listening and notice how you're breathing. Notice your whole state. And you might sense that things are letting go a little bit. So your neck, for example, may let go, or your jaw. And what does it mean to let go? There's a reduction of muscular effort, whether you want it to reduce or not, because you've just brought attention to your neuromuscular self. And as soon as you do that, your nervous system gravitates toward a higher level of functioning. It finds an equilibrium that's more conducive to well-being. it only takes a few minutes here and there to make these kinds of differences for yourself.
Even after that experience, I'm aware of my torso, my chest in the front, back, and sides in a way that I wasn't before. And more fullness in the breath. I can feel the breath in my back, the ribs in the back, the shoulder blades moving backwards. So it's a really very cool experience. I'm standing, so that makes it easier to have the ability to accommodate the movement backwards. So very pleasant, very calming too.
I was leading the movement. I still feel the benefits. So whether you're doing it, thinking it, or speaking it, you're going to have an effect on your nervous system.
Yeah. There's one of the cool things about teaching awareness through movement is when I'm teaching, I'm going through it in my mind. And I'm watching people, I'm interacting with them, I'm doing the lesson.
Mm-hmm.
And that made me think earlier, we were talking about the experience with Alia Crum and the housekeepers and the reframing for exercise. And I'm thinking, wow, as Feldenkrais practitioner, I'm like exercising all the time because I may give 3, 4, 5 lessons in a day and teach lessons during the week. And it's like, that's all exercise. And it's a good kind of exercise too. I think Andrew Huberman and David Sinclair both talk about this kind of low level kind of exercise. I forgot what it's called. You may remember better than I do. And you're not asking to get your heart rate up, or they say like 20 minutes of that a few times a week is optimal. And the other kind of exercise is important too, but that kind of exercise is also really important. The kind of thing that you could talk to somebody while you're doing it. That's what the example they give.
Right. And also it's mindfulness, paying attention. Yeah. So when we're practicing functional integration, our hands are on people, we're aware of how we're moving, we're aware of how they're moving. It's like a synchronous dance in a way with very specific detail. And our minds are completely focused on the nonverbal relationship of movement and also what we say to people. So it's all part of the mix. And we're using tremendous self-awareness or mindfulness while we work. And as you were saying, I always feel better after I work. So I like to work. And I miss it when I don't get lessons. So I can't imagine retiring, so to speak, because I would be robbing myself of feeling well.
Right. People talk to me about retirement. I go, retire from what? Nothing to retire from. Mm-hmm. I plan to keep doing this work, long into my elder years. And why not? I mean, it feels good. I help people. I love it. It's fun. It's interesting. And people who are listening, who are not Feldenkrais practitioners, can get the benefits of this work too. Coming in for private lessons, if you have a practitioner in the area, and doing awareness through movement, do the guided verbal lessons. Like, Donna gave us just a brief experience. Both Donna and I have huge libraries of audio lessons available that you can download and you can participate in our classes. And you can really get the rich benefits of this work. And it's so much fun. It's so interesting. It is not like regular exercise. It is really involving your mind, your brain, as mentioned earlier, your entire nervous system. You become more self-aware. You're mindful of yourself. The benefits are just enormous. And it's so much fun.
Well, I see the joy in your face while I'm looking at you on our Zoom. And it's such a pleasure to talk about the Feldenkrais method with you. Take care now.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
The 2 chapters to which I refer that Feldenkrais wrote, in addition to the Emile Coué book that he translated, have been republished in a little monograph called Thinking and Doing that is available from Amazon and also available on my website, achievingexcellence.com. I've put a link in the show notes below, so you can check that out.
Hi, I'm Donna Ray.
And I'm Al Wadley.
Welcome to our podcast, Feldenkrais for Life.
In each episode, we will discuss ideas and experiences pertaining to the Feldenkrais method.
You're going to learn skills that will move pain to comfort, anxiety to ease, and will explore learning and how to spark creativity.
To learn more about Donna, visit her site at donnaray.com.
To find Al Wadley, go to achievingexcellence.com.